My name is Ashley Smith and this is Ruth Foster, and our paper was a review of a preliminary evaluation of fast-forward language as an adjuvant treatment in language intervention. This article can be found on ASHA's journal website, and there's all the information needed, the authors and the copyright date.
Okay, the purpose of this article was to test the fast-forward language approach and its effectiveness in conjunction with narrative-based language intervention. Both approaches target narrative comprehension and production as well as grammatical output. This research is relevant to SLPs because there's currently not a lot of research that supports conventional intervention effectiveness. The current approach of choice is not really allowing a lot of generalization in other learning opportunities. The research attempts to examine the potential effect of what Scientific Learning Corporation claims, and that is that this gains that students are achieving while using the fast-forward language approach are lasting. So they are insisting that these children are making better generalizations.
The researchers attempted to answer two important questions. Those questions are, number one, does a 5-week course of FFWL lead to immediate gains in narrative and grammatical abilities that are greater than the gains associated with low-intensity dose of a conventional narrative grammar intervention, or no treatment at all? And secondly, does FFWL hold a purpose of enhancing conventional low-intensity narrative and grammatical interventions? The researchers hypothesized for both of these questions. The first being that after the initial 5 weeks, the group with FFWL would not show significant advantages over the other groups. And the second, and most important, the researchers hypothesized that at the final data collection, children who received FFWL first, then NBLI, would show significant gains in language performance compared to those that received NBLI first, then FFWL, or those children that were in the wait and received NBLI program. Originally, the researchers attempted to select children referred by SLPs in Kansas City, Kansas public schools, but Kansas City district restrictions required broader metro area to be recruited. It was also required that the students speak English that were in the study. The referral criteria was that the students have normal cognition and were at risk or diagnosed with language deficits. It was also required the students have a TOEIC 3 standard score of 80 or below, a Goldman-Fristow test of articulation score of 81 or above, and Kaufman Brief Intelligence Quotient, 2nd edition, standard score of 70. 30 children qualified for the study, and a researcher not associated to the project randomly assigned students to one of the 3 groups. The group of 30 children were compared pre-experimentally, and in the end, only 23 children were used in the results due to attendance issues. The students' impairments were generally more severe in expression than comprehension. A one-way analysis and chi-square analysis indicated no statistically reliable difference in the groups at Trial 1. At Trial 1, the experimenters elicited language samples, administered tests of nonverbal language and non-word repetition tasks. In addition to standardized assessments, neurological physiologic testing was conducted. Researchers' primary outcome measures would be derived from the narrative language ability located in the TNL.
There were 2 intervention types used during this study. The first one is the fast-forward language intervention, and that was scheduled for 24 daily sessions for 5 weeks. These children played 5 games per day with a break in the middle. All of those games were generated by the fast-forward language system. The NBLI group had 12 sessions that were scheduled alternating between 2 and 3 sessions per week for a 5-week period. A warm-up, story retell, sentence imitation, and story generation tasks were used to perform this intervention. Results for this, measures were taken at what they're calling time 2, which was in the middle of the study, and a within-group analysis at this point showed that both the group who had the FFWL NBLI and the group that had the NBLI FFWL made small but not significant gains in repetition of nonsense words, but that neither group had improvements that were significantly different from the other or from the weight NBLI group, which was the control group in this study. At the end of the study, what they're calling time 3, it was noted that large statistically significant gains from time 1 to time 3, so from the beginning to the end, were found on nonsense word repetition tasks for the FFWL NBLI group and for the NBLI FFWL group. The mean gain for the weight NBLI group was not significant. There was, however, no differences between the groups in the improvement exhibited from time 1 to time 3. And a comparison of the NLAI scores were not reliably or statistically significant for the FFWL NBLI group, but were for the NBLI FFWL and the weight control group. So the conclusions from this paper stated that evidence is not present to support the claim that the fast-forward language approach enhances responses to conventional language intervention.
Our impressions of this research are that the FFWL approach and program research provided information on quasi-experimental studies performed prior to the recent research. The literature review also provided a rationale for the conduction of the study. The authors also described that children with receptive language deficits might benefit more from this program than those that demonstrate difficulties with comprehension. Therefore, attempting to explain possible results that accept the null hypothesis indicates the research has strong reliability. The authors then go into detail on how to improve the reliability of future research endeavors. They describe controlling extra language intervention and limiting intervention to FFWL only. They also state comparison of FFWL to conventional language interventions. The research design was also moderately strong because they attempted to select a close age group and provided groups such as FFWL with NBLI followed, modified NBLI followed by FFWL, and a 5-week wait period without treatment that is considered the control group. The experiment was conducted during the summer and hopes to reduce additional outside intervention conflicting with results. The children were pre-examined using the same outcome measures to post-examine after a 5-week period, and a specific gain was computed. The application of this research to clinical and school practices is that more research will need to be done to indicate gain from FFWL in isolation. The research provided questions that could be answered with future projects as well.
Okay, this research also had weaknesses and limitations, and sometimes these can affect the validity of the study. One weakness or limitation in this study was that there were limited ethnic groups in the study. There was also a small sample size taken, which can reduce the validity of the study to generalizing. There was a large dropout of participants and also poor participation, poor attendance by those that did choose to participate in the study. In addition to this presentation, we have a handout that explains a lot of this information as well as a few other things.
So we've already discussed a lot of the information that's on this handout, but we do want to go into detail about the literature review. Initially, the researchers discussed previous review that reports large gains after intensive intervals of training as little as 4 weeks. Later, they discuss review that literature that indicates either no treatment-related effects or clinical gains that are specific to FFWL. And then later, they also discuss literature that tested groups of children with comprehension or auditory backwards masking problems and FFWL. These results indicate FFWL was not efficacious for these specific language disorders. And their final research that they discussed was that of research that had brain activity of selective attention that is understood to be connected to language learning ability. And the research was not designed to distinguish between these two possibilities.
This handout that we have provided you also includes the purpose that we have already discussed, as well as a little more information about the research design, a brief summary of the methods, the results, the conclusion, and our overall impressions of this study. We felt that this research was fairly clear and relatively easy to understand and interpret. This data is still contradictory because some studies say one thing and other studies find other information, so further examination of this research should be completed.